Alrighty guys, so if you follow my Instagram, you know I am a garden geek. I love to garden, I love flowers, and I love all things growing, blooming, even cactuses and all of the stuff, and I get really hyped learning names and all kinds of fun details about things. So, we're going to talk about a place my mother-in-law introduced me to, and oh my goodness, I may have to get a membership. So this week we're talking about somewhere new that I have been that you should go to, especially if you live in Pennsylvania or are visiting. And that is one of my new favorite places, Longwood Gardens. If you haven't been and you are, like I am, a geek for botanical gardens, especially those with history, this is the place for you. Now, I'm not being sponsored by Longwood Gardens. This is just me being an absolute geek. Now, I have been to a number of these in a number of different both states and countries. I lived in Europe for quite some time, and specifically in Holland for 3 years, and I remember loving going to the Keukenhof Garden just outside of Amsterdam, which is, of course, the kitchen garden that was part of the royal house. So you get to go in, and they have beautiful botanical areas. They have all the wonderful areas that are set out like gardens that as they would be in palaces, but there are also like indoor hot houses and all those kind of things. So you can see plants that you wouldn't normally see. The way this worked was royalty would bring things from faraway countries so people could enjoy them. Much like zoos were originally created to bring animals from far away to entertain the court, these gardens were similar. Yes, parts of them were just the garden where we grew the food, but also parts of the hot houses were to bring these specimens back so people could study them, so people could see them, so you could just walk out in and relax. Now, I have a number of videos of all the pretty pictures because, as my photo teacher told me, you can never take a bad picture of a plant, and goodness knows, I took a lot of pictures. I came back and discovered I had nearly 200 pictures of just the flowers and plants that I saw that day. So, I'm going to be sprucing in the videos of all the plants, and this is the first one. actually do have art exhibits going on alongside all the gorgeous plants. And we actually got to learn a whole bunch of stuff, which I found super, super neat. So the art exhibit they have right now is bamboo and something else. And I will have it down below so you can see it. And of course, these are all rotating things that go through. So they have these ginormous and smaller bamboo sculptures, which intrigue me because as someone who likes Chuli, sorry, all my art people are yelling at me, Chuli with the exhibits with the glass. They did stuff that was very similar where they took bamboo and flowers and made these gorgeous sculptures around the already gorgeous flowers. Now, this was a present actually for my husband. He got to go see all the internal structure of the fountain works. They usually have a giant fountain exhibit outside where they have shows with lights and water and all that. Now, the day we went, it was kind of chilly, which is the day to actually see botanical gardens, by the way, and threatening rain. And it was overcast and really windy, and that's the part that caused the problem. So we did get to see one fountain display. However, it was a little too windy for us to really enjoy it, so I don't have any video of that. But you can take special tours and go underneath and see all the mechanical work. And he and his father spent much, much time learning about all the generators and the pumps and all the things that go into making these displays, which I'm sure was fascinating, but I didn't go. I'm also not real intrigued with that. So there is that. But they are both engineer mechanics and had a grand old ball. Meanwhile, my mother and I and my daughter went and explored a few of the other things that were outside. So they actually have a student-run garden so that you can grow things there and you could walk through their garden and see all the things. The other thing was there was a student exhibit where they had arrangements of plants that sort of were around a theme, which was super cool to see. And the one thing we learned is a cotton plant is purple, or at least there is a cotton plant that's purple. Now, I am thoroughly a Yankee, never seen cotton in my life. So we were really confused when we saw this, and you'll probably see it in the videos, this little purple pod, which was super cool. And we're like, what is this? And finally my Minnie looked around and goes, Mommy, there's white stuff on it. And so we run around and I'm like, dude, it's cotton. You can see the white puffs coming out of these purple pods. So it was super cool to learn something I had never seen. The other thing was I was able to teach something too because I got to find kiwi berries. And if you have not looked up kiwi berries, pause me and go find them because they're the funniest things to see. They are literally the size of large grapes. But if you cut them in half, they look like kiwis. So they are bite-sized kiwis and they grow on vines even up here in Pennsylvania. So I'm super excited and might have to find that for my garden one of these days. And you can tell I'm excited because I'm talking fast again. So I will try to stop that. Anyways, here's some more stuff that we saw. Next, we went into the actual conservatory or hothouse that had stuff inside, and this is where most of the exhibits were. Now, the one part that I found super excited was they had an entire section of bonsai trees. Now, if you guys don't know about these, bonsais are super cool. They're actually full trees. So if we just left them be, they would be full-size trees. But they are trained and meticulously trained for years and years and years and years to stay this small. It's actually a whole art, and there's stuff behind it, and you should definitely check it out. The reason I find this so cool, besides just containing a tree, because it looks like a full tree in, about the size of my head. These are not big. But some of these have been being trained for 100 years plus. So if you guys look very carefully or even pause the video when you see the bonsai trees, some of these bonsais were starting being trained. That doesn't mean the plant was grown then. It means they started this training then. And the oldest one I think I remember was 1901, which is ancient now. What's that, 120 years almost, where someone has been training this tree to stay that size and have kept this tree alive for 120 years almost. And it's still growing fruit. You guys will see in the pictures, one of these bonsais actually still has a pomegranate on it. It just grew a pomegranate. So this tiny, tiny tree, which is the size of my porg, has this giant pomegranate hanging off of it. And it was super cool. We also got to learn some of the history of the people that did this and all the kind of history behind it, which was also very cool. I'm also a history/learning geek, so that was super cool too. The other thing that was fun that we got to do while they were on their tour is there is actually the original house. Now, the way this started with the history is there were two brothers that decided to preserve certain trees in this area. So they would actually bring in trees and created an entire grove of both endangered trees and local trees and had this giant, giant property of trees. And this was in 1800s, I believe. Then a few hours later, I feel like their family just kind of gave up on it, and they were about to sell the property and wipe out all of this beauty because no one was investing in it. And someone came and said, I will pay for it. Not only will I pay for it, I will improve it. So his name is Pierre Dupont, and he is the oldest of 11 children and actually decided to create this entire environment outside of work. Now, you might remember that name. He is actually very famous in a number of other sectors and was a very, very big businessman, especially in Philadelphia, which I am right outside of Philadelphia. So he decided to have this place where he could escape. And as he got bigger and bigger and bigger in business, he decided to pull away more and be able to escape into the countryside, which is where we are. Now, he married late in life, so he didn't have any kids, but being the oldest of 11, he had plenty of nieces, nephews, great-nieces, and great-nephews, and they would all come to this garden house and this giant garden, and they would have plays, they would have parties, they would have games, and he would spend a lot of time devoting on his family. So this was a place that was very near and dear to him and was super cool, and he wanted to spend as much time there as possible. The other cool thing we learned in the history of it is he actually invested a lot of time in the staff that was helped to build up this place. The builders, the gardeners, everybody was a lot more like family than staff. So there were a lot of events that involved everybody, which is kind of unheard of in this time period, especially for staff being involved in family events of the wealthy. So that was super cool. Now, it did eventually get donated and is now a private sort of historical site, and it has all the museums. Now, I'm going to list, well, I listed one, the bonsais. I'm going to list two more of my favorite things. One was the orchid room, and they actually have a time in February, maybe if I'm really lucky, I'll get to go, where the orchids are on display because that is when they grow. I can't believe that orchids bloom best in February here up in Pennsylvania, but maybe there's just something with inside the conservatory that they can do this best, or that's when they have the most of them. They actually have whole rooms where they can show you other plants they're growing for the exhibit or to continuously add to other sections. So there's like growing houses, there's like sections that have all been built up. There's an entire room of just palm trees And I didn't know there were that many different kinds of palm trees. So there's that. But there's an entire room of orchids, and it just smells so good when you go in, and there's just so many pictures. And I'm sure that's somewhere in the videos that are dispersed through this video. The last thing that was super cool for us, because we got to learn, one of the employees actually saw my daughter, who we were like, well, it's a field trip, you're going to learn. He actually realized that she was there and was intrigued to learn, and he goes, here, did you know this? They actually have this little plant dispersed between the water lilies outside in the middle of the conservatory. And he was telling her how these plants, if you touch them, it turns off a valve, or closes a valve, which will make all the leaves pull up. So it can sense danger and like retracts. And then eventually the valve opens and it gets filled with water again. So it was super cool to learn that these plants were actually almost had a defensive mechanism from being messed with. The other thing was just seeing the water lilies, and there's a section of video there somewhere, and you guys should see the spikes, and I'm talking spikes, on these water lilies. I'm like, this would be the death of any turtle that tried to eat these. And they were just these giant water lilies, and I was talking to my mini, I was like, you could almost see like fairies or giant toads sitting on these things. She actually wanted to try, and I'm like, I don't think it'll hold up in a 8-year-old. It would be cool, but I don't think it's going to happen. The last thing that was super cool was because we were there on a cloudy day, we got to see the night blooming ones. Now, normally night blooming water lilies, close by 11 o'clock. Now, this place doesn't open that late, or that early. So we didn't get there until about 1. And so we still got to see the night blooming lilies were still out because it was so cloudy that they hadn't like completely collapsed yet. So there were still gorgeous night blooming lilies out that you could see, which I thought was super cool. Alrighty guys, so that's all I have for you this week. I loved going and I hope to go again. I have friends that go all the time and I get to see all their pictures. There's a whole kids garden too, which I see all of her little minis playing in the kids garden, which looks super cool. And my mini had a ball going through the kids garden too, even though she's a little bit big for it. What did you guys think? Did you like the flowers? I love the flowers. you guys like flowers, make sure to check out Longwood Gardens. It's not too bad. It's like $22 a person, which is a little pricey, but if you think Ren Fair is $30. Now, my mother-in-law did say there are sometimes periods, especially where there's going to be a bigger population, where you do have to be there at a certain time or like register a time as you're getting tickets. So there is that to look out for. I'm sure things like summer and Christmas is one of those times where you have to be very specific about when you go. But it's always worth checking out. And for me, I've learned that going to gardens is sometimes better when it's cloudy and slightly overcast, because most tourists go during daylight and sunny times. So keep that in mind. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what your favorite flower was, or if you found a flower you don't know the name for, because I learned a lot of names. The one that amused me the most was there is a Jamaican Poinsettia. See if you can find it or if you even know what it is. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys next Fandom Friday. Bye!